Okay, so we've been looking through some really thought-provoking stuff you've sent in about addiction.
Yeah.
And one thing that, jumps right out is this idea that addiction isn't just about, well, harmful substances. It seems much broader.
Absolutely. And that's really what we want to unpack in this deep dive, isn't it?
Hey.
Explore that wider view, especially through Anna Lembke's book, Dopamine Nation.
Right.
And sort of see how it might, connect with your own life, the listener's life.
It made me think straight away about that Denzel Washington story. Someone asked him why he's not on social media, doesn't really use a smartphone, and he just said, because they're addictive. Point blank. He even challenged people, saying, try turning your phone off for a week.
Wow. Okay.
It really forces that question, doesn't it? Are you an addict? Not just in the obvious ways, but are you dependent on things you maybe don't even think are harmful?
That's the core question we're starting with. Moving past just substance abuse to, well, any habit, any behavior, really anything that feels compulsive or like you rely on it.
So for this, we're digging into Dr. Anna Lembke's work. She's a psychiatrist you might remember. We looked at Matthew Walker on sleep, another brain expert.
Right. Similar field, deep understanding of the mind.
And her book, Dopamine Nation, it's grounded in real patient stories, not just theory.
Yeah, and that first case she presents is quite something. Jacob, a man in his 60s.
Okay.
You might think you know where it's going, but there's a twist. And we should mention the source material has a content warning here because of the specifics of his addiction. So we'll be mindful, no graphic details.
Good point. But even the start is intriguing. Jacob shows up, sees Dr. Lemke, a woman, and apparently says he was kind of hoping for a male doctor.
Sets the scene, doesn't it?
Yeah, for revealing his addiction was related to sex.
And what's really fascinating, it wasn't just passive consumption. He actually built a whole machine around it. Again, we won't go to details.
Right.
But Lemke's comment is key. She says, look, Jacob's machine might seem extreme, but basically we all have our own Jacob's machine, our own specific addiction patterns.
And to make that feel really relatable, she shares her own story. Addiction to reading novels.
I know, right? Sounds totally harmless, maybe even good for you.
But she describes how it just took over. Reading excessively started messing with other parts of her life.
And that's such a critical point she makes. It's not always what it is, but the how much, the intensity, the frequency, how it impacts everything else.
Yeah.
She talks about it affecting her marriage, time with her kids, her work, choosing books over sleep, over connection.
It nails that idea of moderation, doesn't it? Even something good pushed too far becomes a negative.
Exactly. When it crosses a line and starts pushing out essentials, good food, sleep, relationships, it flips, becomes harmful.
And she also tackles that common idea that addiction always stems from trauma.
Right. She mentions her own background, privileged, stable, no major trauma history. Her reading addiction wasn't like a coping mechanism for some deep pain.
Interesting.
It suggests the addiction itself, the process, can be the main problem sometimes, not just a symptom.
Okay, so back to Jacob. We might initially think, okay, typical bad habit story. But then there's this shift. It wasn't just the general issue. It got linked to something specific later on.
Precisely. See, earlier in his life, he actually got a handle on a previous issue. Married at 23, moved to Germany. Things seemed to change for the better.
And there's that little side note in the source, isn't there, about how marrying young today might potentially make people more vulnerable to addictive stuff later, just an observation they included.
Yeah, an interesting social comment. But anyway, despite that positive period, Jacob gets pulled back in. The trigger, the internet, around 1995.
The dawn of easy access.
Exactly. Easy access to pornography. And the consequences were severe this time. Lost his job, suicidal thoughts. Really serious.
Which brings us right to Lemke's huge point. The ease of access to the drug is the biggest risk factor for addiction.
It sounds so obvious when you say it, but it's fundamental for understanding addiction now.
Totally. Think about habit loops. Cue, routine, reward. We've talked about that stuff before.
Right, like in Power of Habit or Atomic Habits.
Ease of access just obliterates any friction in the routine part. If it's easy to do, you're way more likely to do it.
Makes perfect sense. The easier it is, the stickier the habit. The source used that fish analogy.
Oh, yeah.
Or you could go through all the effort of catching and cooking a fish, or just tap your phone a few times.
Our brains love the easy path.
And that's what the internet did for Jacob's pornography addiction. Took away the barriers, made it super convenient, and boom, the addiction intensified.
And look around now. Smartphones put everything within easy reach. Junk food delivered instantly.
Vaping almost anywhere.
Sweets, caffeine, everywhere you looked.
Streaming movies, sports, nonstop. Mobile games designed to hook you.
It's constant.
Which leads straight into Lemke's main argument in the book. She says many people today are suffering from basically dopamine addiction. It's broader than just one substance or behavior.
Okay, dopamine. We talked about this in the Passion Deep Dive. The pleasure chemical, motivation.
The master hormone, yeah. Controls a lot of our drive and emotional state. Lemke's point is that constantly chasing dopamine hits, especially easy ones, messes up our natural dopamine flow.
How so?
Well, think about taste. If you eat super sugary chocolate cake all the time.
Cake.
An apple starts tasting bland, right? So you need something even more intense next time, those hyper-palatable processed foods with tons of sugar, fat, salt, just to get the same feeling.
Ah, okay. You build a tolerance for pleasure almost.
Kind of. And that leads to her big quote.
Yeah.
We are the dopamine nation. The addictive state we suffer from in this era is the addiction to pursuing pleasure.
Wow. That's direct.
It is. But it rings true, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're constantly looking for that next hit, that little jolt.
Yeah.
Often just to avoid feeling bored or restless.
Yeah. The source talks about the natural rhythm of life kind of fading.
Exactly. Just, lying on the couch thinking, reading a book slowly, drawing something, cooking a meal, actually talking to someone face to face.
That stuff feels less exciting compared to the instant buzz from your phone or whatever.
Right. That example about sorting peppers.
Oh, I love that.
How that simple task used to be just a way to pass time, maybe even slightly satisfying. Now, agonizingly boring for many people.
Because we expect constant stimulation.
And our attention is being actively hijacked, isn't it? Apps want to keep us scrolling, clicking, watching. It disrupts real life.
The host in the source even said, and I totally agree, prioritize real life, read actual books, more than just consuming endless content online, even this content.
Yeah, good reminder. Live first, consume second.
And think about boredom tolerance. Used to be, the doorbell ringing was exciting.
Right, a little dopamine spike and a calmer baseline. Now, constant pings, notifications, boredom feels almost unbearable. A doorbell might just be annoying.
So Denzel was onto something. Turn off your phones. Maybe not forever, but consciously create that space.
And based on all this, there may be a few things for us, the listeners, to admit or consider.
Okay, like what?
1, maybe, just maybe, we're all addicts in this broader sense. 2, admit that a lot of our drive comes from seeking pleasure, seeking that dopamine.
And 3.
That addiction isn't just for quote-unquote bad things. Reading novels, exercise, even work can become addictive if they get out of balance.
Yeah. And sadly, Jacob's story didn't have a happy ending, did it?
No. It underscores how hard these patterns are to break. He lost his second wife, too, because the pornography addiction just kept its grip, even later in life when he sought help.
Rough.
And Lemke's final word on him is just so encompassing. Jacob, like us, is addicted to pleasure.
Even when the addiction itself seems negative, the root is that search for good feelings for the dopamine.
Exactly. Which brings us to the end, and that line from the source host. I miss boredom.
I felt that. I really do miss it sometimes.
Why do you think?
Because it feels like a sign of a more natural state, not constantly needing that next fix. Being able to just be and find simple things enjoyable again, feeling more connected to reality, maybe.
That makes sense. And this constant dopamine chase, it does have potential links to wider mental health stuff.
Right, the source mentioned that. Loss of passion, depression, ADHD-like symptoms, mood swings.
Yeah, and it teased a future deep dive looking at Daniel Amen's work, which apparently goes deeper into those brain connections.
Okay, something to look forward to. But the big takeaway for now is...
Any addiction, really, is driven by seeking pleasure.
And we live in a world where pleasure is unbelievably easy to get, nonstop access.
Which makes it a massive challenge for pretty much everyone.
So the final thought to leave everyone with, building on this.
Maybe just reflect on your own sources of pleasure. What gives you that little buzz during the day?
And could any of them, even the seemingly harmless ones, be subtly pulling you into that dopamine-dependent pattern?
Yeah. Are your pleasures serving you, or are you starting to serve them? Worth thinking about.